The Siege That Shook an Empire. Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Capps. And my research this term focused on one of the most underrated but decisive moments in the American Revolution, the Siege of Boston, and especially the fortification of Dorchester Heights in March of 1776. I make the case that this was a true turning point, not just strategically, but symbolically, because it showed Washington's early brilliance as a commander and how trust in a young officer like Henry Knox helped change the course of the war. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to tour Boston and to see the terrain for myself. In 1776, Boston was essentially an island within the harbor, connected to the mainland only by a narrow neck of land. Dorchester Heights towered above the city from the south, overlooking the harbor and the British fleet. It's easy to see why Washington understood the tactical importance of that position. I used letters and primary records from Washington, Knox, and even General Howe to explore how this moment looked from both sides. And through the work of historians like David Hackett Fisher and Edward Lingle, I found that this event really helped define Washington's reputation as a leader grounded in courage, strategy, and faith. The Siege of Boston began in April of 1775, right after the battles of Lexington and Concord. British troops under General Thomas Gage and later General Howe occupied the city. Meanwhile, thousands of colonial militiamen surrounded them in what became a standoff lasting nearly a year. Washington took command of the newly formed Continental Army in the summer of 1775. But without heavy artillery, the Patriots had no way to break the siege. That changed when he approved Henry Knox's incredible plan to retrieve the cannons from Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York. Knox's expedition is one of the most impressive and logistical feats of the war. He and his men hauled over 60 tons of artillery across the frozen rivers, snowy mountains, and dangerous terrain in the dead of winter. Once the cannons arrived, Washington acted decisively. On the night of March 4th, 1776, American troops fortified Dorchester Heights under the cover of darkness and placed the artillery in position. When British General Howe saw the high ground bristling with cannons aimed directly at his fleet and his supply lines, he knew that he could not hold the city any longer. In his own testimony to Parliament, Howe defended this decision to evacuate, but he couldn't deny that Washington had outmaneuvered him without even firing a shot. This operation didn't just end the siege, it changed the tone of the war. It was the first major victory for Washington, and it proved the Continental Army could succeed through ingenuity and discipline, not just brute force. David Hackett Fisher in Washington's Crossing notes how this moment set the stage for a later victories like Trenton and Princeton. Edward Lingle also emphasizes that Dorchester Heights revealed Washington's emerging style as a general, one rooted in calculated risks, moral conviction, and trust in his men. And Washington himself, in his own letters from this period, consistently acknowledged providence. He didn't boast in his own success. He gave credit to the divine timing and provision that made it possible. This moment in the Revolution aligns with biblical worldview in powerful ways. Washington's restraint, humility, and trust in God's guidance echo in verses like Psalm 20 and verse 7. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of our Lord God. While the Patriots had limited resources, they had courage, conviction, and commanders who believed they were fighting for something greater than themselves. In conclusion, the fortification of Dorchester Heights during the Siege of Boston was a strategic masterpiece, and a moral victory. It forced the British to retreat from their first stronghold, gave the colonists confidence in their cause, and introduced George Washington as leader whose courage and character would define the revolution. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.